Democracy, it decides how we are governed. Diplomacy, it decides how our country survives in a dangerous world. Globalization, it decides our economic opportunities. Then nuclear weapons, they decide the limits of human survival. Now, India, our great nation, it stands at the center of these coachings as a rising global power. India must balance democracy at home and diplomacy abroad. India must benefit from globalization without losing independence. India must remain, we must remain secure in a nuclearized region without losing its moral voice. So, today, let's talk about war, diplomacy, and India's place in a rapidly changing world. What happens in distant countries, it may look like international news. But if you look carefully, you will see how these events slowly affect our country, our economy, and sometimes even our daily life. If you see the example on 28th February 2026, a major conflict, it started in West Asia. The United States and the Israel, they carried out joint military strikes on Iran. In these strikes, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, he was killed. After this incident, tensions increased very quickly. Air strikes, they continued. Iran launched retaliatory attacks. The conflict started spreading towards Gulf countries. The entire region entered a period of uncertainty and instability. At this point, a natural question comes to our mind. Where does India stand in this conflict? India is not directly involved. India is not directly involved in this war. India has not sent troops. India is not part of the fighting. But India cannot remain unaffected. This is because India has strong economic, strategic, and human connections with this region. This conflict, it affects three very important Indian interests. The first is the safety of Indians living abroad. And the second one is India's energy security. Then the third one is India's global diplomatic reputation. Nearly 10 million Indians, they live, they work in Gulf countries. These are not just numbers. These are workers, these are engineers, drivers, nurses, technicians, and professionals. Every year, they send nearly $50 billion back to India. This money supports their families. This money supports education, healthcare, and small businesses. This money also strengthens India's economy. At the same time, India depends heavily on West Asia for its energy needs. Around 60% of India's oil, India's gas imports, they come from West Asia. This means any instability there, it can directly affect fuel prices in India. When oil prices increase, transport costs, they increase. When transport costs increase, then prices of goods, they also increase. This is how an international conflict, it slowly reaches ordinary households in India. Because of these realities, India cannot react emotionally. India must act, we must act carefully, we must act strategically. This is why India's official response, it has been cautious. India has repeatedly asked for dialogue, restraint, and de-escalation. Even before this escalation, India had already advised our citizens to avoid unnecessary travel to Iran from January 2020. But diplomacy is never that simple. Every decision is examined, every action is questioned, every delay is noticed. So some critics say India reacted slowly after the death of Ali Khamenei. Some foreign policy experts, they believe this delay, it may have affected India's image as a neutral country. Then some opposition leaders, if we take, including Sonia Gandhi, they questioned whether India was maintaining its traditional balanced foreign policy or not. For many decades, India tried to maintain good relations with all sides without fully joining any power bloc. Then another issue discussed by experts and analysts is India's growing closeness with Israel and Donald Trump. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he visited Israel on 26 February 2026, just 2 days before the conflict began. Even if the visit was planned earlier, the timing, it raised questions in diplomatic circles. Some experts, they worry this could affect India's relationship with Iran. Iran has been important for India. Not only because of oil supplies, but also because of strategic projects like Chabar Port. This port, it gives India an important trade route to Central Asia. There are also economic concerns. If the Strait of Hormuz, it faces serious disruption, India's oil import bill, it could increase. If this happens, fuel prices, they will rise. Inflation, it may increase. The pressure will not be felt only by governments. It will be felt by common. This situation, it forces to think about a deeper question. Can India remain truly independent in its foreign policy? For many years, India followed a strategy called multi-alignment. This means India built relations with many countries at the same time without becoming dependent on any single group. This approach, it helped India maintain a flexibility. But today, the global scenario is changing. The global situation is changing. The world is again becoming divided into two power groups. This creates a difficult choice. Many experts, they suggest that India must improve its response system. India must react faster during crisis. India must speak clearly when international law is violated. India must improve systems to protect Indians living. India must diversify its energy sources so that it is not too dependent on one region. India, it must also maintain balanced relations with Israel, Iran, Gulf countries, Russia, and the United States. Above all, India must remember one guiding principle: national interest. National interest, it must always come first. This means protecting energy security. This means protecting jobs. This means protecting Indians working abroad. This also means protecting India's strategic independence. This crisis, it is not only about war in West Asia, it is also a test of India's diplomacy. It tests how quickly India can respond. It tests how well India can maintain balance. It tests how strong India's leadership can become in global politics. Because in today's world, power is not only about weapons. Power is also about diplomacy. Power is also about timing. Power is also about clarity. Power is also about courage. Courage to remain balanced. Even pressure increases. So, with these questions in mind, let us begin this discussion. Let's look at that. A difficult side of the story. Difficult side of the story. That's international politics. In international politics, timing is very important. When Iran's supreme leader was killed on 28th February 2026, many countries, they reacted quickly. Statements, they came within hours. But India took about 5 days. India took about 5 days to officially express condolences. Only on 5th March 2026, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, he signed the condolence list at the Iranian embassy. This delay, it created questions. Some critics, they said neutrality does not mean silence. They argued that when a major leader is killed, a fast response, it shows confidence. A slow response, it may look like hesitation. Some reports even suggested that Indian diplomats were initially told not to sign the condolence. This created a perception that India was trying to avoid upsetting the United States and Israel. So, India's first official reaction. It also created debate. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he spoke early with leaders of Gulf countries and Israel. But direct communication with Iran, it happened later around 12th March 2026. Experts, they say diplomacy is not only about being balanced, it must also look balanced. If actions appear one-sided, even careful diplomacy, it can look biased. Then, another point of criticism, it came from India's position at the United Nations. India joined more than 130 countries in supporting a resolution asking Iran to stop attacks on Gulf countries. But India did not support any similar resolution condemning the initial strikes or the civilian deaths or the assassination. So critics, they say that it created an impression that India was moving away from its traditional independent foreign policy. There was also questions about India's silence. India's silence on The United States, it destroyed the Iranian naval ship IRS there. This ship, it had recently participated in naval exercises with India. Yet, India did not strongly react. India also did not step forward to offer mediation between the sides. Countries like Russia, China, they made stronger public statements. India, which often presents itself as a balancing power, but our country, it chose a cautious path. Some experts believe India missed a chance to show leadership. These diplomatic signals, they did not remain only at the political level. They started affecting India in practical ways. The biggest impact, it came through energy prices. This created real problems. LPG supplies, LPG supplies were reduced in some sectors. Long queues, they appeared for gas cylinders. The biggest lesson from this situation is very simple. A country of India's size, we cannot depend too much on any one side. India's strength, it has always been its ability to maintain relations with different countries at the same time. This is called strategic balance, which we should supposed to maintain. When we ask what is wrong with the world, most people immediately start pointing fingers. We blame governments. We blame capitalism. We blame casteism. We blame feminism. We blame technology. We blame social media. We blame migration. We blame inequality. And increasingly, people blame each other. People blame each other. But what if the real problem is deeper than all of these? What if what we are seeing today is not just a political crisis, not just an economic crisis, not just wars between nations, not just conflicts, not just conflicts between ideologies, not just battles between powers, not just nuclear threats hanging over humanity, not just missiles, not just bombs, not just military build-ups, but something much deeper than all of these. What if beneath all these wars, beneath all these conflicts, beneath all these global tensions, what we are actually witnessing is a civilizational confusion. What? Because something very unusual is happening in our time. We are living in the most connected age. We are living in the most connected age in human history. Yet people feel more divided than ever. We are living in the most technologically advanced age. Yet people feel more anxious than ever. We are living in the most materially comfortable age. Yet people feel more emotionally insecure than ever. And this contradiction, it will disturb us. Because today, something invisible is breaking. Not infrastructure, not economies, not technology. Something far more important is breaking. our shared sense of meaning. Our shared sense of meaning. That is breaking. For thousands of years, societies were held together by three invisible forces. The first one is shared values, shared responsibilities, shared purpose. Today, all these three are weakening. Families are shrinking. Communities are fragmenting. Trust is declining. Institutions are losing credibility. We are becoming strangers. We are becoming strangers not only to others, but even to ourselves. We are becoming strangers. Look around carefully. Young people today, they face a strange paradox. They are more educated. They are more educated than any generation before them. Yet, many youngsters feel less secure about their future. They have more choices. They have more choices, yet there is more confusion. They have more connections online, yet more loneliness offline. They have more freedom, yet more pressure. Housing is becoming unaffordable. Healthcare is becoming expensive. Education is becoming a debt trap. A stable jobs are becoming uncertain. At the same time, relationships, they are changing. Relationships are changing. Gender expectations, they are changing. Family structures, they are changing. Marriage patterns, they are changing. But instead of clarity, many people feel frustration. Many men, they feel uncertain about their role. Even women, they feel overburdened by expectations. Dating is becoming transaction. Loneliness is becoming normalized. For the first time in modern history, many people are surrounded by people, but struggling to find belonging. And then there is the digital revolution. There is a digital revolution. The internet, it promises knowledge, but that internet is also brought distraction. Social media promised connection, but it also brought comparison. Platforms, they promised voice, but they also amplified outrage. Never before has humanity had so much information and so little agreement on. Never before have opinions traveled so fast, but understanding is so slow. And slowly something else is happening. Attention is becoming the new currency. Outrage is becoming the new entertainment. Truth is becoming negotiable. And loneliness, it is becoming epidemic. Even our institutions, they are facing crisis. People are losing trust in governments. They are losing trust in media. They are losing trust in corporations. They are losing trust in everything. Sometimes even losing trust in justice systems. Many feel rules apply differently to different people. Many feel corruption cannot be challenged. Many feel real problems are ignored while symbolic debates, they dominate headlines. So, when trust collapses, society, it becomes fragile because no law can replace trust. No policy can replace character. No technology can replace wisdom. At the deepest level, many observers are beginning to say something. Maybe the biggest problem is biggest problem is human nature itself. This is the biggest problem. Selfishness. This is the biggest problem. Short-term thinking, greed, caste, creed, loyalty. Caste loyalty, creed loyalty over collective good. Maybe modern life is not creating these weaknesses. We have already within us. Maybe modern life is amplifying them. It is amplifying them. The problem with the world is not that we don't know what is wrong. The problem is that we have forgotten what is wrong. Right? That may be the most uncomfortable truth of all. We have not just forgotten what is wrong. We have forgotten what is right. We have forgotten what is right. Because maybe the crisis we are seeing today is not just economic, not just political, not just technological. Weapons, they do not create crisis. Human confusion. Human confusion, it creates crisis. Bombs, they are only symptoms. Wars are only consequences. Conflicts are only expressions of something deeper. What we are really facing, it may be something far more serious. That is a crisis of purpose, a crisis of meaning, a crisis of wisdom, a crisis of what it means to be human in this modern world. Because when humanity forgets what it stands for, it begins to fight over everything else. And when purpose disappears, power becomes the only language. So, we are redesigning our society. We are redesigning our society. What kind of human being are we trying to produce? Because until we answer that question, we may build faster economies, but we cannot build better society. We may create smarter systems, but we cannot create wiser people. We may produce more success, but we cannot produce fulfillment. And that is when the question begins. When we ask, what is wrong with the world, maybe we should first ask this. What kind of world are we trying to build? And what kind of humans do we want to become? And that brings me to the real crisis of our time. The directionless of modern man. The directionless of modern man. Not directionless of destiny, but directionless of purpose. When we ask what is wrong with the world, we usually begins with numbers. We talk about GDP growth. We talk about inflation rates. We talk about unemployment statistics. We talk about stock markets. We talk about crime percentage. But very rarely we do ask the most important question. The most important, what kind of human beings are we trying to create? That is the biggest confusion. That is the biggest confusion of modern civilization. Because today humanity knows how to increase production, but it does not know how to increase purpose. How to increase purpose. Today, we in India proudly celebrate becoming the 5th largest economy. Nations compete in technological dominance. Artificial intelligence, it is expanding. Space missions, they are increasing. Digital revolutions, they are happening everywhere. But we must pause We must ask, let's ask a dangerous but necessary question. Are we building better humans or just bigger economies? What we are building? Because something strange is happening in the modern world. We have smart cities. We have smart cities. But we have stressed citizens. We have digital revolutions, but emotional disconnection. We have global markets, but we have personal loneliness. More communication tools, but we have less understanding. More career opportunities, but less lifetime. This is the real directionless we are talking about today. Not physical directionless, but it is moral directionless, psychological directionless, and civilizational direction. A situation where humans have houses but no direction. A situation where careers have but no meaning. A situation where we have freedom but no purpose. Look at the modern youth. Look at our modern youth. This is the most educated generation in Indian history. They have degrees, they have certificates, they have technical skills, they have access to global knowledge. But many also have. They also have fear of failure, career anxiety, identity confusion, social pressure, mental exhaustion. Competition has increased. Opportunities have increased. But clarity has decreased. Today, a student knows how to code. Does he know why he is living? He knows how to earn, but does he know how to live? And this is not just India. This is the global crisis. We say greatly about America. America has enormous wealth, but a mental health epidemic. You can see it. Europe has social welfare, but declining birth rates and identity crisis. China has rapid development, but extreme performance pressure. India has growth, but deep inequality. We have deeper inequality. Across the world, one silent question is, what is all this progress for? Because we are solving problems without defining the purpose of human life. Imagine a doctor treating a patient without knowing what health means. That is modern politics. That is modern politics. We are trying to fix a society without deciding what a healthy society looks like. Actually, we don't know what is our societal problem. Today, politics talks only about efficiency, efficient governance, efficient economy, efficient systems, efficient administration. But we must ask, efficient for what? Because a machine can be efficient. A surveillance state can be efficient. A dictator and a dictatorship, it can be efficient. A prison can be efficient. Efficiency alone is not civilization. Efficiency without humanity is dangerous. History proves this point. Nazi Germany, it was efficient. Colonial administration of Britishers, they were efficient. Authoritarian regimes, they are efficient. But they were not human. Modern civilization, it is making the same mistake again. Worshipping efficiency instead of humanity. And until we answer the question, the world will remain materially advanced but morally confused, technologically powerful but emotionally fragile, economically rich but spiritually empty. Because if you look honestly at our world today, we see not just conflict, we see confusion. Not just instability, but we see directionlessness. We are living in the age of artificial intelligence, yet also in the age of human destruction. Even as we talk about the Mars missions, semiconductor revolutions, and trillion-dollar tech companies, we are still counting bodies in war zones. We are counting dead bodies in war zones. And this is the strange contradiction of modern civilization. We know how to move fast, but we don't know where we are going. We don't know where we are. Look at what has been happening in just recent months. Since March 2026, Israel bombed Iran, Lebanon. If we see the reports from Lebanon, humanitarian agencies, they indicate roughly 2,000 deaths and thousands were wounded within weeks in Lebanon. Among them were civilians, doctors, healthcare workers, families. Here, more than 100 children, they were killed. Over 300 children injured. Think about that. That is not strategy. That is not geopolitics. That is not ideology. That is human tragedy. Entire residential buildings, they were collapsed. Multi-generation families, they were wiped out. We must ask, is this power? Or is this directionless power? Because power without direction, it becomes destruction. More than 1 million Lebanese people, they were displaced within weeks. That is nearly 20% of the country's population. Families sleeping along the coastline in Beira. Children, they are growing up in tents instead of homes. Parents, they are searching for food. They are searching for water. They are searching for medicine. Not because humanity lacks resources, but because humanity lacks direction. At the same time, strikes connected to the escalations involving Iran. If we see escalations in Iran, it caused nearly 3,000 deaths, with tens of thousands were injured. Among those 3,000, more than 1,700 civilians, 1,700 civilians, 200 children were killed. More than 1,600 children were injured. And again, we must know. Are we progressing? Are we progressing, or are we simply becoming more efficient at destruction? Because the real crisis today is not just war. It is that humanity has become powerful without becoming wise. We have direction. We have direction in technology, direction in markets, direction in military strategy, but we are losing direction in morality. That is the real danger. Because history shows something very clear. Civilizations, they do not collapse because they lack power. Civilizations, they collapse because they lose direction. The Roman Empire, they had power. The Soviet Union, they had weapons. Europe, before First World War, they had industry, they had science, but they lacked moral direction. And that is what destroyed them. Philosophers, they have warned us repeatedly. Albert Einstein, he said, our technology has exceeded our humanity. Mahatma Gandhi, he warned us, speed is irrelevant if you are going in the wrong direction. Yes, Mahatma Gandhi warned us. Viktor Frankl, he warned us, humans suffer most when they lose meaning. And today, we see exactly what this wars without wisdom, weapons without restraint, growth without purpose, freedom without responsibility, technology without humanity. This is not just conflict. This is directionless civilization. Because bombs do not fall. Because bombs do not fall because science exists. Bombs are falling because we lost the direction. Killings do not happen because weapons exist. Killings are happening because moral direction collapse. Hunger does not exist because food is obscene. Hunger exists because priorities are directionless. Crime does not grow because law is absent. Crime grows because values are absent. This is why the real crisis today is not just geopolitical conflict. It is existential directionless. We have developed the science of destruction faster than the philosophy of peace. The economics of growth faster than the ethics of justice. The technology of connection faster than the culture of understanding. We have developed. And that imbalance is dangerous. Because technology without direction, it becomes chaos. It becomes chaos. Power without direction, it becomes violence. Freedom without direction, it becomes confusion. And progress without direction, it becomes danger. History, it teaches us again and again, civilizations are not destroyed first by enemies. Civilizations are destroyed when they lose their direction. When profit becomes more important than purpose. When power becomes more important than wisdom. When victory becomes more important than humanity. And this brings us to the most important question of our life. Not how powerful we can become. Not how advanced we can become. But whether we still know where we are going, our direction. Because the greatest danger is not that humanity will become weak. The greatest danger is that humanity will become powerful but directional. Because a powerful but directionless civilization is more dangerous than a weak one. And that is the crossroads humanity stands at. So, we must decide, do we want a fast civilization or do we want a wise civilization? Do we want a rich civilization or do we want a meaningful civilization? Do we want a powerful civilization or do we want a human civilization? Because the future will not belong to the most powerful nation. The future, it belongs to the nations that rediscover direction. The direction that is based on human dignity, direction that is based on human responsibility, direction that is based on human compassion, direction that is based on human wisdom. Because civilization, they do not survive because of weapons. Civilization survive because they know why they exist. Civilizations do not survive because of power. Civilizations survive because they know where they are going. Because until humanity rediscover its direction, we may continue to build powerful nations. But we may fail. We may fail to build a meaningful civilization. And that is the real crisis of our time. Not power, not war, not technology, but we are living in a very dangerous times in human history. Many people think world wars belong to history books. Many people think technology made us civilized. Many people think globalization, it made war impossible. But reality is very different. Because before World War I, Europe was also economically connected. Before World War II, leaders also believed diplomacy could it prevent conflicts and wars. Before every major war, people believed war was impossible. And yet, wars happened. Today, again in 2026, the world is slowly dividing into two major power centers. On one side, we can see the US-led democratic coalition with NATO countries, Indo-Pacific partners, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and many others who claim they are protecting the post-World War II international order built on law, built on trade, and built on collective security. On the other side, if we see the growing strategic understanding between China and Russia, which is supported indirectly by countries like Iran and North Korea. They argue that the current world order, it is unfair and dominated by Western powers. World wars, they rarely start because someone wants a world war. World war usually start because of miscalculation. A small conflict, it becomes a regional conflict. A regional conflict, it becomes an alliance conflict. An alliance conflict, it becomes a global conflict. That is exactly what happened in 1914. One assassination, one local dispute, one diplomatic failure, then within weeks, the entire world was burning. One assassination in Sarajevo, that is the killing of Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, that happened on 28 June 1914 by a Serbian nation. Then one local dispute, the conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, after Austria accused Serbia of supporting the assassination and it issued an ultimatum. Then we can see one diplomatic failure here. European powers, They failed to negotiate peace. Instead, alliance their commitments pulled countries into war. Here, Russia supported Serbia. Russia supported Serbia. Germany supported Austria-Hungary. France supported Russia. Britain entered after Germany invaded Belgium. Then, within 5 weeks, World War started between June and August in 1914. War started as a Balkans political crisis. It became a World War I involving more than 30 countries and eventually causing 20 million deaths. One invasion in Poland. This is Second World War foundation. That is by Hitler. One territorial dispute over Danzig. One failure of appeasement diplomacy. Within short span of time, the entire world was burning with Second World War here. So, if we see one invasion in Poland, on 1st September 1939, Adolf Hitler's Germany, it invaded Poland to expand territory and reverse the Treaty of Versailles. Then, one territorial dispute, that is, Germany demanded control of Danzig and the Polish Canada. It was claimed by Germans they were being mistreated. Germans claimed that they were mistreated. Then their one diplomatic failure. Britain and France, they tried appeasement, but when Germany refused to stop expansion and when Germany attacked Poland, their diplomacy collapsed. And within 2 days, on 3rd September 1939, Britain and France, they declared war on Germany, turning a European conflict into World War II, which latter involved more than 70 countries and caused about around 85 million deaths. So, today we can again see multiple flashpoints. Iran, Ukraine, Taiwan, South China Sea, Middle East, Korean Peninsula. Individually, these look like regional tensions, but together they form a global risk network. And this is where we must understand a very powerful lesson. Wars are failures of diplomacy. Because when diplomacy works, wars don't stop. That is why the next World War, Third World War, if it ever happens, will not start because weapons exist. It will start because diplomacy fails. Today, humanity has nuclear weapons capable of destroying civilizations. But at the same time, humanity also has international law, and we also have diplomacy, we also have trade interdependence, and we also have global institutions. So the real question is not whether we have destructive power. The real question is whether we have emotional intelligence equal to our technological power. That is the question. Because this is the first time. This is the first time in history where human anger can destroy the entire species. Think about that. In World War I, about 20 million people died. In World War II, about 85 million people died. In a modern global war, the number may not even be counted. And people may not even understand that a war has already started. Because the war will be entirely different. That is why today the strongest nations They are not those with the biggest armies. The strongest nations, they are those with the smartest diplomacy. And this is where law becomes more powerful than weapons. And international law. International law. It is nothing but humanity's attempt to control its own destructive instincts. Then diplomacy. Diplomacy is nothing but structured conversation. Diplomacy is structured conversation to prevent structured destruction through wars. And there are treaties. They are nothing but promises. They are nothing but promises humanity it makes to itself to survive. But treaties only work when leaders respect restraint. Humanity, it repeats mistakes. It repeats mistakes only when it refuses to learn. So the real question is not whether US and China, Russia, they will compete. Competition is natural. But the real question is whether competition will remain economic and technological or if it becomes military. So that is the question. And that depends not only on leaders, but also it depends on intellectuals. It depends on intellectuals, it depends on citizens, it depends on thinkers, it depends on educators, it depends on public awareness. Because wars begin in the minds of people. Wars begin in the minds of people long before they begin in the battlefields. So, what sort of societies do we have today? If societies glorify domination, war becomes easier. If societies value stability, peace becomes stronger. If societies reward aggression, conflict, it becomes inevitable. If societies reward wisdom, diplomacy becomes powerful. Yes, diplomacy can bring power. And the next world order, and next world war, it will not be decided only by missiles and armies. It will be decided by whether humanity chooses ego or survival. We are not in a traditional world war like 1914 or 1939. But we are living in a dangerous period of continuous conflicts, a world of indirect wars, a world of proxy wars, a world where one mistake can start a bigger crisis. So, the danger is real. The danger is real. If we ignore this, it is very dangerous to humanity. US-Iran attacks, they continued for weeks. Energy facilities, they were targeted. Industrial plants, they were hit. By early April 2026, thousands were dead in Iran, with additional losses in other regions. Strait of Hormuz oil, it routes, they came under threat. So, Iran crisis, it tested global energy security. Ukraine crisis, it tested Western unity. Gaza, it tested Middle East stability. Each crisis, it made the world more tense. Each crisis made escalation more normal. In the Middle East, the United States under Donald Trump and Israel's leadership, they justified strikes. They justified strikes as preventive security action. Then in Europe, Vladimir Putin, he's been continuing Russia's strategy based on long-term pressure and attrition. Then Iran's leadership, they responded to US through missiles, drones, and regional networks. China under Xi Jinping, it is watching carefully. China is calculating long-term advantage, especially regarding Taiwan. North Korea, it supports Russia through weapon supply. These are not emotional decisions. These are strategic calculations. Each leader is thinking about survival. Each leader is thinking about survival. They are thinking about power. They are thinking about nation. Since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, when Iran removed a US-backed ruler and challenged American influence, trust between the two countries collapsed. The US sees Iran as a threat because of its nuclear ambition, missile program, and support for groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran sees the US as a country trying to control the Middle East and weaken its government through sanctions and pressure. So, this is the perception of Iran from the point of view of Iran. So, this conflict, it is not just about weapons. It is about mistrust built over more than 45 years. Then, after the strikes on Iran in 2026, Donald Trump, the US President, he made several strong and controversial statements. In early March 2026, Donald Trump, he demanded what he called unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender from Iran. He warned that Iran could develop missiles capable of reaching America. So, he threatened Iran to destroy its infrastructure. And he threatened to destroy power plants, oil wells, bridges, electric grids. Trump said American forces had not yet used their full strength. Then, in early April 2026, during a national address, Donald Trump declared the war was nearing completion. At the same time, he warned attacks could continue for weeks. Then, Donald Trump also claimed Iran had requested a ceasefire. Then, Iran immediately rejected this claim. Iranian leaders, they responded strongly. Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, he wrote an open letter to the American people. He asked Americans a simple question. Is this war really in your interest? He said Iran had no hostility towards ordinary Americans. He accused the US government of spreading misinformation. Iran also said the Strait of Hormuz would remain under Iranian control. And they warned of further retaliation. At this point, we must understand something important. Wars are not only about fighting, they are also about narratives. Each side, it tries to control their story. Each side, it tries to control global opinion. So, here let us ask a question. If the world has so many powerful leaders, if the world has so many international laws, if the world has the United Nations, if the world has diplomatic forums, if the world has peace treaties, the question is, still, why do wars still continue? Is it because we don't have rules? No. It is because rules without enforcement, they become suggestions. And suggestions, they cannot stop tanks. So, one of the biggest truths of International politics is this. International law. It is only as strong as the willingness of powerful nations to respect. This may sound harsh, but it is reality. It is reality. Scholars of international relations, they have debates. They have debated this for decades. Some say institutions, they create peace. Others say power, it decides everything. But the truth is, law works. Law, it works when interests align. But law fails when interests collide. That is the tragedy of global governance. The world created institutions. The world created institutions after World War II to prevent another catastrophe like World Wars. The United Nations, it was designed to stop aggressions. International courts, they were created to punish crimes. Treaties were written to protect human rights. But there was one major weakness. One major weakness is it is built into the system from the beginning. That is power politics. Power politics, it was never removed. The UN Security Council, it gave veto power to 5 countries to prevent direct conflict between these nations. The idea was simple. If the most powerful countries feel secure, global war, it can be avoided. But the unintended consequence, it was also simple. If powerful countries, they disagree, then nothing moves. So, we created a system to prevent world war, but also a system that sometimes prevents justice. This is one of the biggest paradox of modern diplomacy. Justice requires action. Justice requires action. Peace requires sometimes inaction. And leaders constantly struggle between these two. If you see modern conflicts, resolutions blocked, investigations delayed, statements issued, meetings conducted, but on the ground, bombing continues. People die, cities collapse. So, diplomacy without consequences, it becomes theater. Law without enforcement, it becomes symbolism. And agreements without trust, they become temporary pauses. Even research tells something very interesting. Many countries, they sign treaties, not because they want to follow them, but because they want international legitimacy. Sometimes these agreements, they become public relation tools rather than moral commitments. This is why motivation from geopolitics, it becomes very important for our personal life also. Because the same pattern exists in human behavior. Promises without discipline, they fail. Rules without accountability, they fail. Plans without execution, they fail. Intentions without courage, they fail. The world does not fail because of lack of knowledge. The world fails because of lack of implementation. Many people know what is right, but few people do what is right when it becomes difficult. That is the real leadership test. Doing the right thing. right thing when it is easy is reputation. Doing the right thing when it is costly, it is character. And today, the global system is facing exactly this test. Wars, they are often start not because leaders are evil, but because leaders refuse to appear weak. Fear of losing prestige, fear of losing influence, fear of domestic criticism. These psychological pressures sometimes they become more powerful than rational calculations. So, emotional maturity is not only important for individuals, it is also important for civilization. A mature person, he controls anger. He controls anger. A mature nation, it can control escalation. A mature leader, he can control reaction. Because reaction is instinct. Restraint is intelligence. Today, the world is also facing another new challenge. Modern conflicts are changing. Earlier wars, they were between armies. Earlier wars are between armies. Today wars, they involve hackers, they involve information barriers, they involve economic blockades, proxy militia, artificial intelligence, etc. So the conflicts we see today are not isolated wars. They are signals. They are signals. Signals that the global system is under stress. Signals that alliances are hardening. Signals that diplomacy is weakening. The global institutions, they are struggling to maintain relevance. This is not just conflict. This is a transition. This is a transition facing world order. This is the new reality. No war is regional anymore. Every war is global through economics. Every conflict is interconnected through alliances. And that is exactly why diplomacy is more necessary today than at any time in history. The paradox is the need for diplomacy. The need for diplomacy. Today, it is increasing. Diplomacy, its need is increasing while investment in diplomacy is decreasing. And this is a dangerous contradiction. Now the question becomes, what must nations do immediately if they want to prevent systematic instability? What the United States, Western Bloc, they must do. Their responsibility. The US, it must remember something history has proven again and again. Military dominance, it creates fear. Diplomatic credibility, it creates influence. Without diplomatic credibility, even strong nations, they become strategically isolated. Recent conflicts, they show that military actions without parallel diplomatic tracks, they risk widening instability and economic consequences globally. So, the Western Bloc, it has the responsibility. The Western Bloc has the responsibility. Rebuild diplomatic institutions. Strengthen alliances through dialogue, not with pressure. Create crisis negotiation channels, even with rivals. Avoid humiliation diplomacy. Invest in long-term conflict prevention. Because leadership in the 21st century is not about dominance. It is about a system. It is about system and system stability. The responsibility of Iran is it has to recognize the reality. Endless resistance can preserve sovereignty, but endless confrontations, it prevents economic recovery. Regional escalation involving allied groups, it shows how quickly proxy conflicts can widen wars beyond original battlefields. Strategic survival today, it requires selective engagement, not surrender, not escalation, but controlled diplomacy. It requires controlled diplomacy. Even adversaries, sometimes they must negotiate for survival. Even Cold War. In Cold War, even Cold War enemies, they negotiated because survival is always a shared interest. Then you can see the responsibilities of Russia and China, what they must do. Their strategic position during the Iran conflict, it shows how great powers can benefit economically and strategically from instability without direct intervention. But here is the long-term danger. In short term, we can see opportunities, but in long term, if great powers only compete, systems collapse becomes possible. Great powers, they must act as stabilizers, not only competitors. Because if great powers do not manage stability, regional conflicts, they will become global confrontation. Then let's talk about the responsibility of middle powers. Here we can see Gulf states, Asian countries, African countries, Latin America countries. The most important countries of the future, they may not be the biggest. They may be the most trusted like India. Countries that can speak to all sides may become the new peace infrastructure. Recent diplomatic attempts by regional and middle powers to reduce escalation, it shows that how mediation channels, they still matter even during war. Neutrality today, it is not passive. Neutrality is strategic diplomacy. Bridge nations, they will become more important than block nations. Because divided worlds, they need connectors. So what global institutions they must urgently reform if international law becomes optional? If international law becomes optional, power becomes the only. Recent disputes over shipping rights and the maritime access, it shows how quickly legal norms are tested during conflict. The world must strengthen international law enforcement, conflict mediation, mechanisms, economic crisis, coordination, energy security cooperation, crisis communication frameworks, and above all, diplomacy. Because without global rules, alliances become the only protection system. And alliance systems, they historically produced world war. The biggest lesson for humanity. That is, we must understand one thing. Modern wars are no longer about victory. They are about damage limitation. Because even the winners in the world, they face economic disruption. They face energy shocks. They face trade instability. They face security uncertainty. The 2026 conflicts, they already show how energy markets, supply chains, and global crises, they react instantly to regional wars. This means something very important. In modern war, everyone loses something. Even winners lose something. So, the real strategic shift it needed is this. From victory mindset to stability mindset. From domination strategy to coexistence strategy. From alliance rivalry to crisis management cooperation. There is a simple pattern. When diplomacy weakens, arms races increase. When communication reduces, miscalculations increase. When alliances harden, flexibility disappears. And when flexibility disappears, small conflicts, they become uncontrollable. The real danger today is not one war. It is multiple connected conflicts happening in a fragile system. And systems do not collapse. Because of one shot. Systems collapse because of accumulated stress. Maybe the real test of leadership today is not who can threaten more, but who can stabilize more. Not who can escalate faster, but who can de-escalate first. Not who can dominate rivals, but who can prevent systematic AI. Because the future may not belong to the strongest military powers. The future belongs to the most psychologically mature powers. Let us imagine one simple question. Why do nations go to war? Is it because they are strong, or is it because they hate each other? For this question, history gives a surprising answer. Most wars, they do not begin with weapons, but most wars, they begin with fear. Then most of the wars, they begin with misunderstanding. Most of the wars, they begin with wrong perceptions. If you observe the scholars' opinion of USA and Iran relations, they noted that many conflicts are continuing not because interests cannot be solved, but because both sides they fail to understand each other's intentions and each other's fears. War is not only a battle of armies. War, it is a battle of narratives. And today, we are seeing this again. Let us look at the present conflict between US and Iran. On February 28, 2026, a major war, it began with a large joint military operation called Operation Epic Fury. It was a joint military campaign initiated by the United States and Israel against Iran. History teaches us a strange but a powerful lesson. One of the most controversial arguments they are emerging from the 2026 Iran, US, Israel conflict. It is the claim that the timing of the war, it conveniently shifted public attention away from the growing Epstein files controversy. In late February 2026, political pressure in the United States, it was intensifying because of this Epstein files controversy. Due to partial documents released, missed disclosure deadlines, and accusations that powerful individuals were being protected, those who involved in the Epstein files. Media coverage was dominated by questions about accountability and transparency at that time. Then almost suddenly, then a conversation changed. The conversation changed, it diverted. So on February 28th, 8 strikes that began. And within hours, the national debate moved from legal scrutiny to national security. Critics, they point to the sequence not as coincidence, but as an example of what political scientists call diversionary conflict theory. This is the idea that governments facing domestic crisis sometimes they benefit politically when attention shifts towards external threats. So, the world's greatest or sometimes the world's greatest, the world's terrible revelations, they often start from the most trivial things. If we take the example, many of us think history changes because of great leaders, big wars, or powerful nations. But sometimes history changes because of something very small, trivial, something ordinary, something nobody takes seriously at first. So that is this example, the strangest example. It comes from the Epstein scandal. Epstein scandal. In February 2005, at Royal Palm Beach High School in Florida, two girls, two 14-year-old girls, they had a fight during a gym class. It was not a political debate. It was just a teenage argument. In these two girls, one girl, she saw $300 in another girl's purse. She accused her of being involved in prostitution. Teachers intervened. School authorities, they questioned the situation. Investigators began tracing where the money came from. You know then, the money, it led to massage sessions. Massage sessions. The massage sessions, it led to a mansion. The mansion, it belonged to Jeffrey Epstein. What started as a schoolyard quarrel between two teenage girls, it slowly became one of the biggest scandals involving powerful elites, powerful politicians, powerful businessmen, and powerful celebrities across the world. A trivial incident, a small incident between two girls, it became a global revelation. A small spark, it exposed a hidden empire. This teaches us something important. History does not always begin with explosions. Sometimes it begins with whispers. The same strange pattern is now visible in global geopolitics. The 2026 war between Iran and US-Israel alliance, it shows that a similar historical irony. At first glance, the war looked like a story of overwhelming military power. Operation Epic Fury. Operation Epic Fury. It began with massive airstrikes. The objective was clear. Destroy Iran's strategic capabilities, break Iran's leadership, force political change in Iran. Then Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he was assassinated. Top Iranian leaders, they were killed. Senior IRGC commanders, they were killed. Security officials, they were eliminated. Nuclear and other missile facilities, they were damaged. The first phase itself, it showed the scale. More than 1,500 civilians died. and millions of citizens were displaced. Iran's missile production, it reportedly dropped. And Iran's drone capability, it also dropped. Naval assets, they were damaged. Then Iran's nuclear facilities, they were hit. From a conventional military perspective, this looked like a deja blow to Iran. But history teaches something interesting. Sometimes survival itself becomes victory. So let's ask one question. If one side has stronger air power, if one side has more technology, if one side has more money, how does the weaker side continue to fight? So we have an answer. If we see the history, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, they showed it, they fought it. The answer is asymmetric warfare. Fight differently, fight indirectly, fight economically, fight psychologically. So, Iran, it appears to be following this doctrine. Iran is not fighting stronger, but Iran is fighting smarter. Iran is fighting differently with cheap drones that cost thousands, forcing responses that cost millions. Iran, it may not fighting directly everywhere, but Iran, it is fighting indirectly using proxies. Iran is using regional networks so the battlefield stretches without direct confrontation. Iran is not only fighting with weapons, but it also fighting with economics, it also fighting with economies. It is using the Strait of Hormuz. It is using it like a pressure point on the global oil system. Iran is not only fighting on land and sea, but it is also fighting in the minds of people. Iran is able to shape media narratives, resisting Donald Trump's mediation pressure and increasing the political cost of war. And this is where the war becomes even more interesting, because this is not just a military confrontation. This is a contest of credibility and political psychology. So, in March 2026, President Donald Trump, he issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran. He said, reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face devastating attacks on Iran's energy system. The message was clear. The message was clear to demonstrate America's dominance. And they wanted to demonstrate their deterrence. They wanted to demonstrate control over escalation. But after that deadline, what happened next? It revealed the deeper nature of modern conflict. The 48 hours deadline, it became 5 days. The 5 days became another 10 days. Deadlines became extensions. Then ultimatums became negotiations. And in strategy, every extended deadline, it sends a signal. Because in geopolitical psychology, credibility is currency. When threats are repeated but delayed, adversaries, they begin to test whether the real strategy is force or fear of escalation. Iran understood this perfectly. Instead of reacting emotionally, Iran reacted strategically. Instead of escalating directly, Iran escalated symbolically. Instead of responding only with weapons, Iran responded with narrative warfare. Iranian officials, They marked the deadline. They marked the deadlines. They framed the extensions not as diplomacy, but as hesitation. They used Trump's own communication style, his tweets, his statements, his bold language. They treated it as a material for psychological counter warfare. Because Iran understands something very important about modern superpowers. Democracies, they do not fight only on battlefields. They fight inside public opinion. They fight inside media cycles. They fight inside election calculation. So, Iran's strategy is not just military resistance. It is political endurance. Iran is essentially asking one strategic question. Who can tolerate pressure longer? Because Iran knows it cannot defeat America in aid power. But it may be able to outlast America in political stamina. This is the same strategy. This is the same strategy used by Vietnam in Vietnam War. Do not defeat the army. Defeat the will to continue. And this is why psychological warfare becomes central. If Iran can make American threats look uncertain, if Iran can turn deadlines into debates, if Iran can transform military pressure into political pressure, then the battlefield slowly shifts. The battlefield slowly shifts from geography to perception, from missiles to credibility, from destruction to endurance. And this reveals the uncomfortable truth of modern conflict. Power today is not just about who has the strongest weapons. Power is about who can control the story of the war. And this is where Iran's strategy, it becomes even more complex and uncomfortable to understand. Because Iran is not only fighting the United States and Israel directly, Iran is also winding the battlefield without formally winding the war. By striking US aligned Gulf nations like UAE, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, Iran is sending a strategic message. It is sending a strategic message. If you support the war, you cannot remain outside the cost of the war. It's the message. Hundreds of missiles, thousands of low-cost drones. They have not only targeted military infrastructure, but also they have disrupted airports, ports, energy hubs, and financial centers that symbolize stability and global commerce. Even when most projectiles, of course, they are intercepted, the falling debris, they temporarily closed the airports, the fires near oil terminals, and the fear it created in cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. It has served a deeper purpose, a message to the nations who are supporting US and Israel allies. This is not just a physical damage. This is economic signaling. This is psychological pressure. Because in the 21st century, wars are fought with missiles, wars are fought with markets, wars are fought with media, but most importantly, wars are fought with narratives. Sometimes the side that controls the narrative, the side that controls the narrative, it controls the outcome. This is not a war of speed. This is a war of patience. This is not a war of domination. This is a war of survival. Because Iran, it understands one hard truth of modern conflict. If you cannot defeat a superpower, you make the superpower pay the price of continuing the war. Sometimes survival itself becomes victory. So instead of direct confrontations, Iran used low-cost, high-volume tactics. For example, a Shahid 136 drone from Iran, it may cost around $20,000. But for interceptor missiles, the Patriot thought they can cost millions of dollars per shot. It creates what military analysts call cost imbalance warfare. Spend little, force the opponent to spend more. So Iran reportedly launched hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones in waves. Even when many were intercepted, the economic pressure it was created. We can see the consequences today in the US. Iran also uses something called mosaic defense. This is a decentralized command structure. This means if leaders are killed, operations do not stop. The other leaders, local commanders, they continue to fight. Networks continue, institutions continue. This is called institutional resilience. We can learn from history. Strong institutions, they survive even when individuals fall. This explains why even after leadership losses, but Iran's operations, they continue. But the most powerful weapon in this war, it may not be missiles. It may not be missiles, but it will be geography. It will be geography. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. Around 25% of global oil trade, it passes through this narrow waterway called Hormuz. Think about the number. Out of every 4 barrels of oil, when this route was disrupted, the entire world, it felt the shock. So oil prices, they reportedly crossed $100 per barrel. Shipping, it slowed. Insurance costs, it increased. Energy markets, they reacted. This shows something important. Modern wars, they are not only fought on the battlefields, they are fought in supply chains. They are fought in markets. They are fought in fuel prices. They are fought in global inflation. But here comes the most important lesson. What does winning mean? For a superpower, victory, it means dominance. But for a smaller power, victory means survival. So, some analysts, some experts, they describe Iran's position as winning by not losing. They are winning by not losing. If the regime survives, if the system continues, if collapse does not happen, that itself becomes strategic success. This is the harsh logic of geopolitical survival. But let's pause. Let us step away from the strategy. Let us step away from numbers. Let us step away from missiles. Let us ask one human question. Who pays the real price in the wars. Not generals, not prisoners, not strategies. The real cost is paid by children, children who lose homes, families who becomes refugees, workers who lose livelihoods, students who lose their future. History tells us this fact. Very painful, because wars are decided by leaders but suffered by ordinary people. The US, Iran, their relations, they remind us of an important lesson. Even enemies, they often have common interests. That is stability, security, economic growth, regional peace. But mistrust, it blocks cooperation. This is the tragedy of geopolitics. Nations, they have common interests, but they do not have trust. And without trust, even dialogue, it becomes impossible. So, if you see the history, in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world came very close to nuclear war. The United States, the Soviet Union, these are the two superpowers, and they have their nuclear weapons ready. Missiles are deployed. The world was afraid. Do you know what prevented this catastrophe? Not weapons, not threats. But this war is prevented by communication, back channel talks, letters between leaders. War, nuclear war, it is prevented by diplomatic signals, understanding fear, understanding red lines, understanding consequences. So always dialogue and diplomacy, they save the world. They save the world. Today, we need the same wisdom. Because military victory alone, it never brings lasting peace. Germany, it learned this after World War I. Punishment created World War II. Japan learned this after Hiroshima. Destruction, it created peace only when reconstruction followed. South Africa learned this after apartheid. Dialogue, it prevented civil war. Peace, it is never built by humiliation. The world peace, it is built by inclusion. So, what should the world learn? What we learn? What world can learn from this? First lesson, military power, it cannot solve political mistrust. Second lesson, economic pressure, it cannot replace dialogue. Third lesson, killing leaders, it does not kill ideas. Fourth lesson, security cannot be achieved by making everyone insecure. So, what is the way forward? Not escalation, not humiliation, not revenge. The answer is three words: peace, dialogue, diplomacy. Peace, it is not weakness. Dialogue, it is not surrender. Diplomacy, it is not compromise of dignity. They are the highest forms of strategic intelligence. Because war can show power, but peace, it shows wisdom. Let us imagine a different future. What if instead of drone production, nations competed in education? What if instead of missile ranges, nations competed in healthcare? What instead of sanctions, if nations invested in cooperation. What if instead of fear, nations invested in trust? This is not idealism. This is the logic. This is the logic for survival. Because in a nuclear world, in a nuclear interconnected world, nobody wins a large war. Everybody loses. Everybody loses differently. So, let me end with a simple thought. And after all the strategies, after all the doctrines, after all these missiles attacks, we must come back to the most important truth about war. War does not only destroy military targets. War, it also destroys people. If you see, on 28th February, in the very first hours of this conflict between US and Iran, a missile strike, it destroyed an elementary school in Iran, a two-story school building. It collapsed. More than 160 lives were lost. Many of these children, they were between 7 and 12 years old. The children who did not know geopolitics. The children who did not know strategy. These are the children who did not know why missiles were falling from the sky. They only knew fear. These Iranian children, they only knew fear. Some were waiting for their parents. Some children, they were sitting in classrooms. Some were running for safety, and suddenly they became statistics in a war they never chose. International organizations, they condemned the strategy, they condemned the US operation. Investigations, they suggested outdated intelligence. It is because of outdated intelligence in targeting errors. But the families, explanations do not bring those children back. This is the final and most painful lesson of every war. Leaders, they discuss power. Analysts, they discuss strategy. Nations, they discuss victory. But the graves, they only receive innocent people. Innocent. This is why history must always remind us, in war, there are no real winners. Because even when countries claim victory, humanity loses something it can never replace. Every destroyed school, every displaced family, every child they lost, it is a reminder that peace is not just a political option. Peace is a human response. War begins when we believe the other side cannot be trusted. But peace begins when we decide understanding is still possible. History shows wars start with misperception. History also shows peace begins when those misperceptions are corrected. So, maybe the real question is not who is winning this war. But the real question is, can humanity learn before the next war begins? Because the greatest victory is not defeating an enemy. The greatest victory is preventing a war. Today, we must begin with a very serious and uncomfortable reality. The world is becoming more dangerous. Since COVID-19 pandemic ended, wars have started increasing since 2019. The number of armed conflicts, they have increased sharply. The world is becoming more dangerous again. By 2024, nearly 130 conflicts, they were active around the globe. This is the highest number of conflicts since World War II. By 2026, battle deaths, they remain very high. And many of these conflicts are not ending. Instead, they are becoming longer, more complex, and more destructive. Today, nations are racing to produce weapons. COVID-19, it was a natural disaster. But wars, they are human decisions. The rise of strong leaders. When politics becomes about personalities instead of nation's welfare, the risk it increases. When decisions they depend on one leader instead of depending on policies and systems, you know what happens? Mistakes they become big. This is the strongman era. In this strongman era, it is showing us how one decision can shape the world. So, today the real question is, not can we survive this pandemic of strongman era, but the real question is, can we survive an age where power is becoming more personal, where power is becoming more emotional, and where power is becoming more risky? Because the strongman era, it is testing our political system. And this test, it may be much longer. So, the important question is, why are political leaders taking more risks today than they did 20 years ago? One major answer is the rise of strongman politics. The rise of strongman politics. Today, many countries, they are no longer guided by institutions, diplomacy, or international rules. Instead, many decisions, they are being shaped by individual leaders. Individual leaders. In the post-Cold War period, from 1991 to around 2014, many countries followed multilateral cooperation. Once there were international institutions, powerful institutions. Of course, even today we have United Nations, World Trade Organization, and diplomatic alliances. In those days, they played strong roles. So, leaders often, they try to avoid large wars because globalization, it connected economies and increases the cost of conflict. But today we are entering a different political era. This is a leader-driven era. This is a leader-driven geopolitical era where individual leaders, they take bold risks to strengthen their domestic political image, even if those decisions increase global instability. But they take the bold decision to protect their image. Strongman leaders, they often use 4 political tools. First, they centralize decision making instead of relying on institutions. They depend on a small circle of loyal advisors. Then second, they promote nationalism. They present themselves as defenders of national pride. That is the second. And third one, they use populist rhetoric. they divide the society into common people and elites. Then fourth, they weaken institutions. They weaken institutions that could challenge them. They weaken courts, they weaken media, and they even weaken the opposition. When these four things combine, foreign policy, it also becomes personalized. War decisions, they become political survival strategies. Diplomacy, it becomes second. Diplomacy becomes secondary. This is exactly what we are seeing in Indian nations. The 2026 Iran conflict, it shows how this works. In February 2026, the United States and Israel, they launched major strikes on Iran. In reports, they suggested that President Donald Trump, one man army, he personally approved the operation. Donald Trump had earlier started negotiations with Iran, and he gave deadlines for nuclear restrictions. But when talks slowed down, the decision moved towards military escalation. So, strongman leaders, they often value speed and decisiveness. They sometimes see long negotiation as weakness. They prefer dramatic action that shows strength. So, Donald Trump's public language, it also reflects the same. Personal branding, personal framing. Instead of presenting the operation only as national policy, he described it as a personal achievement and personal success. This shows another feature of personalized politics. So, foreign policy, it becomes connected to personal image. Another important factor is political survival. Strongman leaders. These leaders often face domestic political pressures. When leaders face criticism, when leaders face investigation, or when leaders face political challenges. So these strong foreign policy actions, they help them to project their strength. This does not mean every decision is taken only for political reasons. But it shows how domestic politics and foreign policy, they become closely connected in personalized leadership system. So, Donald Trump's foreign policy style, it often emphasizes strength, deterrence, and national interest. His approach is preferred direct deals over multilateral negotiation. This shows how strongman leadership, it can shift global politics from institutional cooperation towards leader-driven agreements. Then we can see another example. It was his intervention and his approach towards Venezuela in early 2026. There are also reports suggested decisions were taken quickly with a limited institutional debate. Again, it also showed a pattern of personalized decision making. His supporters often say leaders like Donald Trump, they bring decisiveness. But critics say such leadership, it increases risk because fewer institutional checks and there are miscalculation risks. This is the central debate. About strongman politics. Now let us see what is happening in Europe. Russia invasion of Ukraine that started in 2012. It is one of the most important examples of strongman decision making in modern history. From 2022 to 2026, estimates suggest more than 4 lakh total casualties in Russian-Ukraine war. These casualties included military and civilian deaths. This makes it the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II. This war was heavily shaped by Vladimir Putin's personalized political system, strongman leadership. Vladimir Putin, he has ruled Russia either as president or prime minister since 1990. Over this long period, power became concentrated around him. Independent media was declined. Political opposition in Russia, it was weakened. Decision making, it became centralized. When leaders stay in power for very long periods, a dangerous problem sometimes develops. They begin to trust fewer people, which means they don't trust anyone. They do not receive criticism. They may not like to hear alternative opinions. This increases the risk of strategic miscalculation. So, Vladimir Putin, he justified the invasion. Of Ukraine using historical and nationalist arguments. He repeatedly claimed Ukraine was historically part of Russia and not a fully separate nation. He also framed the war as resistance. It was a resistance against NATO expansion and Western influence in Ukraine. This narrative, it helped him to mobilize domestic support in Russia. It also allowed the Kremlin to portray the war as a defensive struggle rather than aggression. By 2026, the war continues. The war continues with the heavy fighting in eastern Ukraine. Russian offensive, it continues, but they are facing very strong defense from Ukraine. So casualties, they remain high on both sides. Sanctions, they isolated Russia economically, but internal political control, it allowed the leadership to continue the war despite the economic pressure on Putin. This shows a key feature of strongman systems. When institutions are weak, leaders can continue costly wars longer because there is no internal opposition because it is limited. This war has also transformed European security. So now NATO countries, they are increasing defense spending. Finland and Sweden, they moved closer to NATO. Europe reduced dependence on Russian energy. Russia, it strengthened ties with China. Russia, it strengthened ties with Iran. One leader's decision, it reshaped global alliance. This shows how personalized power, it can destabilize entire regions. Then another example. If we go back to 2023 October 7th, we can see this. Hamas launched a major attack into Israel. Then Israel responded with a large military campaign in Gaza. By the time a ceasefire was reached in October 2025, total deaths, they exceeded 88,000 people, mostly Palestinians. This war also shows strongman. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he had been facing political pressure before this war. He faced corruption allegations. He faced corruption trials and also he faced political. His coalition depended on nationalist and religious parties. So, during this war, his leadership, the Benjamin Netanyahu leadership, their narrative, it emphasizing national survival and security threats. He framed the war as necessary to prevent future attacks and protect Israel's existence. This type of framing, it is common in strongman politics. Security threats, they are emphasized. Security threats are emphasized. Leadership, it becomes personalized. Criticism, it becomes political risky. In 2025 and 2026, Israel conducted strikes against Iran and Iranian-linked projects. It increased regional risk in Middle East. And if we go to Asia, Myanmar, in Myanmar it shows how strongman rule it can produce prolonged civil conflict. In 2021, the Myanmar military, it overthrew the elected government. The military leadership, they claimed election fraud and national stability. Since then, resistance movement, they formed across the country. By 2025 alone, conflict deaths, they exceeded 10,000 and total casualties, they are continued to. The military leadership, it uses nationalist messaging, trying to protect national unity. At the same time, media restriction and opposition arrest, they have decreased. This shows a pattern. When democratic institutions collapse, conflict often becomes prolonged because there are no trusted mechanisms for negotiation. Again, you see the same pattern. You can see the same pattern in Afghanistan. Rising instability in Afghanistan. Cross-border terrorism and concerns, and assertive nationalist rhetoric, they have intensified tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan between 2025 to 2000. This reflects a broader strongman trend where leadership personalization and security-driven nations, they often replace diplomatic restraint and it increases the danger of escalation. If we go to Africa, it also shows another version of strongman conflict dynamics. If we see in Sudan, conflict between military factions began in 2020. Rival generals, they began fighting. They are fighting for power after political transition failed. By 2025, deaths, they exceeded 20,000 and millions of people were displaced. This is classic big man politics. Big man politics where personal power struggles, they replace institutional government. Then if you go to Ethiopia, in Ethiopia, conflict it began in 2020. It is between federal forces and regional forces. This conflict it caused around 148,000 cumulative deaths. In the Sahel region in Africa, military coups, they occurred between 2020 and 2020. These military coups, they brought new strongman leaders to power in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. These leaders, they promised security against terrorism, but also they reduced democratic space. They expanded expelled French forces. They invited Russian security cooperation. Insurgencies started. This shows how strongman politics they can internationalize local conflicts. Then if you go to Mexico, in Mexico, cartel violence it continues to cause thousands of deaths. Since COVID-19 pandemic, cumulative deaths, they exceeded 80,000. These situations show how personalized leadership on multiple sides can increase confrontation. Today, about 74% of humanity, they live under some form of autocratic government. This does not automatically cause war, but it reduces institutional checks that normally reduce violence. The result is what we can see now. We can see at present trade tensions. We can see military tensions. We can see refugee crises. We can see energy crisis. We can see nuclear risk. The post-Cold War world, it hoped globalization would reduce war. Instead, now we are seeing that political leadership, it still matters greatly. Today's strongman-driven world. Today's world is strongman-driven world. It is more fragmented. It is more fragmented. Global cooperation is weaker. National competition is stronger. Regional instability is increasing. But remember, there is also resistance. Resistance also exists after 2008, after the financial crisis, after rising inequality, after cultural conflicts, after migration pressures, after ecological disruptions. The world started changing. Trust in institutions began declining. Trust in governments began declining. Trust in scholars began declining. When trust in systems declines, people begin searching for strong individual leaders. So, this is how the age of strongman leadership began. Nearly 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli, he wrote a famous book called The Prince. In that book, he explained a political truth. Many people still they do not want to accept that fact. Machiavelli said that people often prefer a leader who can provide security rather than a leader who only promises moral values. So many strong leaders today, they build their image around strength, control, and decisiveness because fear, it creates political stability. It creates political stability. But Machiavelli, he also wants something else. He said, a ruler, he must never become hated. If fear becomes hatred, then collapse begins. This is the danger zone of strongman politics. And another important thinker, Samuel Huntington, he explained political change through what he called waves of democracy. Huntington called it waves of democracy. According to Huntington, democracy does not grow continuously. It grows in waves. It grows in waves and it declines in reverse waves. The first wave began in the 19th century. The second wave, it came after World War II. The third wave, it came after the Cold War. Now, many scholars, they believe that we are living in a democratic reverse wave. Data also support this statement. This does not mean democracy has disappeared. It means democracy is under pressure. So if you see China showed the world without democracy, the economic growth can happen without Western style democracy. This challenges the Western assumption that capitalism automatically produces liberal democracy. In China, the China centralized power after 2012. Xi Jinping, he removed presidential term limits in 2018. He strengthened party control. He used anti-corruption campaigns to discipline the political system. China government, it built perhaps the most advanced state surveillance system using artificial intelligence and data modeling for the surveillance of people. If you see in India Modi showed another model. India remained democratic. Politics became personalized. Leadership, it became central to political messaging. Here the big factors are national security, media, PR, cultural and religious identity. They became political drivers in India. If you see in Turkey, Erdogan, he showed how democratic leaders, they can gradually centralize power. After the failed coup attempt in 2016, he expanded presidential anarchy. He restructured institutions. He justified these actions in the name of national security. If you go to Latin America, leaders like Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil and Javier Milei in Argentina, they showed how economic crisis, it produces demand for radical leadership. In El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, he showed the security strongman model. Crime reduction, it became his political legitimacy. Civil liberties concerns increased in his rule, but public support remained, and because security improved in his rule. So, when people feel unsafe, they often accept reduced civil freedoms in exchange for safety. Now, we must understand the deeper cause. The first cause is economic transformation. Globalization created winners and losers. Urban areas grew richer. Rural and industrial areas, they often declined. When economic inequality grows, political anger grows. The second cause is cultural change. Rapid social change, it creates identity insecurity. Migration, demographic shifts, and cultural transformation, they create fear among some groups. So, stronger leaders, they often promise cultural protection. That is, then the third cause is technology. Social media changed political communication. Emotional messages is spread faster than policy discussion. Public debate, it became more polarized. Another cause is geopolitical change. The world is moving from a unipolar system. Which is dominated by United States. It is moving towards a multipolar system. It included China, Russia, and other regional powers. When global power structure, it starts to change domestic politics, they also become more nationalist. Now, let's look at the consequences. One consequence is weakening of international cooperation. Weakening of international cooperation. Strongman politics, they often prefer bilateral deals instead of multilateral agreements. This increases global uncertainty. Then, another consequence is increased geopolitical tensions. Through this strongman leadership, we can see increased geopolitical tensions. The Ukraine war, the US-China rivalry, Taiwan tensions, and the Middle East instability. They all exist in a world where nationalist leadership is rising. Then another consequence is domestic polarization. Domestic polarization. Societies, they become divided between supporters and opponents of strong leaders. Supporters and opponents of strong leaders. Political compromise, it becomes harder. Another consequence is institutional stress. If you see the four pillars, they will fall. Already you can see courts, media, and other regulatory bodies. They face political pressure in many countries. Now let us think about the future. Will strongman politics they dominate permanently? If you see answer to this question from history, it suggests no political model it remains firm. Because political systems they evolve. Strongman systems often depend heavily on individual leaders. When leadership changes, systems also change. So, democratic systems, they depend on institutions, not on individual leaders. Institutions, they survive leadership changes more easily. The future may not be a simple democracy versus dictatorship conflict. Countries that balance strength, countries that balance accountability, they succeed the best. So finally, we must remember something very simple. Nations do not collapse because of strong leaders alone. Nations collapse when citizens stop valuing institutions. So the role of citizens is important for any country. The future of democracy does not depend only on politicians or strongman leaders. It depends on its citizens. If citizens demand accountability, then automatically democracy survives. If citizens demand only emotional leadership, nationalism, then strongman politics expand. So we are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to personality-driven politics. Other path leads to institution-driven politics. So we should move to the next. If strongman politics is increasing vast today, then what kind of world are we entering? Modern wars, they are not local wars. Modern wars are not local wars anymore because Middle East conflicts, they trigger global economic effects. Oil supply disruptions, they created major energy instability. Some analysts, they call it one of the largest supply disruptions in modern energy markets of this Hormuz disruption. A war in the Middle East, it can increase fuel prices in India. It can cause inflation in Europe. It can disrupt shipping worldwide. So, strongman politics, they are increasing this because leaders, sometimes they use military action to demonstrate strength domestically. So, future wars, they include nuclear warfare, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence warfare, information warfare, economic warfare,
This means war is expanding beyond these battlefields. And we can observe war is also entering banks, bank systems, data networks, technology, supply chains, even including media. The biggest lesson humanity must learn is when institutions weaken, mistakes they increase. When criticism disappears, miscalculations they increase. When nationalism dominates a country, compromise becomes difficult. History, we can learn from history. It teaches a simple truth. Strong leaders, they may start a war, but strong institutions, they prevent war. The safest societies, they are not those with most powerful leaders, but they are those with the strongest balance between leadership and economy. The biggest danger in present day is not weapons, or not only weapons. It is also political psychology. If leaders begin believing compromise is a weakness, you know what happens? Automatically wars increase. Humanity has survived dangerous periods like World War I, we caused it. World War II, we caused this dangerous period. The Cold War period, we caused it. Each time humanity created new rules. Whenever we crossed a dangerous time, new treaties, new institutions, new diplomatic systems. So, the final lesson of this Strongman is simple. Power without restraint, it creates danger. It creates danger. Nationalism without responsibility, it creates conflict. Technology without ethics, it creates risk. And leadership without the institutions, it creates instability. If nations can balance strength with wisdom, power with accountability, national pride with global responsibility, then even this dangerous era, it can become a transition period instead of a because the future will not belong to the strongest armies alone. It will also belong to the wisest political system. It will belong to the wisest political system. And history always remembers not the loudest leaders, not the strongest leaders, but history remembers the societies that led the